Willkommen, bienvenue, welcome once again to another live stream featuring Karen Bashford, the Empowerment Mentor. This is, in fact, the Karen Bashford Show, where we talk about things that can really affect you without necessarily you knowing or being able to put a name to what they are. It's often a series of feelings, maybe a deep-seated regret, whatever it is. They can all come together to change the very direction of your life. Today's topic is no exception to that. In fact, why don't you introduce today's topic, Karen?
Okay, well, the topic today is know yourself. I chose it because I realized recently that in knowing myself, I've actually changed my life in ways that I'd never thought would be possible. And that has opened up so many things for me.
So, knowing yourself
Mm-hmm.
does sound a bit cross-legged, saying a lot, uh, kind of thing, self-reflective, but it's not really that, is it? It's about, was it understanding your limitations, or rather knowing when to blow past what your perceived limitations have been?
It's that. Knowing yourself is also very much about your emotive responses to situations. Knowing yourself is very much about understanding what you really want in life. Because we go through life so often with no clear focus, we're just living. Whereas if we actually accept that we have control over what we do, we can change so much for ourselves.
I seem to remember somebody eminent saying to me, "You realize, Gareth, that most people are going through life flying by the seat of their pants."
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the perception that we have is that everyone has a plan and it's all by design. When in actual fact, a lot of people are flying in a completely reactionary manner.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the one thing I realized in the whole time prior to my nervous breakdown. I was just reacting to circumstances. I
Right.
wasn't in control of A, how I responded, but B,
Right.
also my physical choices of how I wanted to live life.
It's shocking that you can get to a ripe old age, such as I,
I'm
and you
glad you
realize,
said that.
like, I can only speak for my own. Um, and you don't necessarily have a concrete direction. You've got a whole bunch of different things that you're attracted to, but no one direction. And it can sometimes feel like you're in the middle with forces pulling you in all different directions.
Hmm.
And I think that's probably more common than not. I don't think I'm alone in that.
No, I was one of the many because that's how we grow up. We're not really ever focused enough on what we truly want. We're just
Right.
following a path because our parents teach us how to react, how to behave, what to think, even at times, because that's what they're there for. They're there to guide us. But we don't have to necessarily follow their guidance for the rest of our lives. We can
No.
choose something different. But
Yeah.
that's the one thing we forget is we can make the choice to be different. We don't have to follow the family rules, the family progress, or anything like that.
Yeah. It's a kind of conundrum in a way, because you've got the acceptable mores of the people you mix with and the culture you find yourself in, which we have to accept as a complete accident of fate. I could have been brought up in Namibia, where there'd be a completely different
Yeah.
approach to the topic, or Southern Australia, where often your geographical location can define what is considered to be normal. And then top of that, your peer group, which again you initially have little control over because they usually derive from your school or that sort of thing. And then on top of that, your parents. And all these forces, seen or unseen, make you recoil away from certain things and be drawn directly towards others. None of which I'd call thinking for yourself.
Yeah.
Have I been drifting through my life on someone else's playbook? It does feel that way sometimes.
Most of us do. It's only when we really wake up to the reality that we do have that choice, that we don't need to follow somebody else's rule book, that we can make different decisions. And knowing yourself is part of that journey, because in reflection, you can see how you followed certain attitudes, certain behaviors from parents, other people, what you're taught in school, because schooling is diabolical for teaching you the wrong things.
Certainly made me afraid of all the wrong things, and also damped down my natural critical thinking. You know, I was always the why bird, the one who wanted to ask why. Why do we have to do that? Why is that the accepted norm? Why have I got to learn this? Why have I not got to learn that? And now I suppose I'm more celebrated for that fact. But back then it was considered the most terrible thing one could do was veer away from the established direction.
But that's what school's about. It's got a set program to take you through, and this is what you're supposed to do. But the silly thing is, we all learn through action, through physically doing things for ourselves or physically thinking things through for ourselves. And yet here we are sitting at school being told this is what you've got to believe because this is how it's taught, rather than allowing us to actually say, well, why? Why is a really, really good question to ask, because then it opens so much up for you. And knowing yourself allows you to ask yourself, why am I doing this? What is the purpose of me being here even? Because quite often not, most people do not know the reason they're here.
Well, do you know what? That was a question that used to dog me a lot. I could not understand the beginnings of any form of purpose. It just seemed that I swanned through life and tried to avoid pitfalls, but purpose, eh? That's a hard one. That's a real hard one.
Well, yes and no. One of the things that I've learned through my own journey is, as a soulful being, spiritual being is another way of putting it, we can come here to learn and to grow. Because every experience we have, we take with us as a soulful being when we pass. And we will come back. Whether you believe it or not, we are a soulful being. And so consequently, we will come back at some point. That growth that we go through every time we experience something enables us to move forward. So we have a purpose of being here to learn, to grow.
Right.
That's our purpose, the basic foundations. How we then grow from there is a different matter altogether, because we agree with ourselves before we're born that in our lifetime we want to experience certain things. And we can only experience those certain things by doing certain things. And that's all part of our growth.
I just wish there was some sort of plan or map, or
But
at
you
least
have one.
Where?
Up here, in your heart.
inaccessible to me. I've got no idea what the plan is.
Because you've never connected with your inner child. You connect with your inner child, your soul, and you'll know your plan for life.
I think
Ooh.
well, my inner child is a being that spent a lot of years being exceptionally frightened, and
But then your
ways,
inner child is your soul. So your inner child knows why you went through those experiences of being frightened. And the lessons that you can take from those experiences, which will enable you to grow, but also your inner child is there to actually help you go forward. And by asking and connecting with your inner child, you actually are given that guidance that you're seeking to know your purpose of being here
right?
and actually what you're supposed to be doing. It's not the same as a psychiatrist would use as the inner child. I'm talking about your core being, not that little child that went through childhood. This is your core being, your very soul.
Yeah, it all sounds a bit frightening, frankly.
You need to meet your inner child to understand it's not frightening. Far from it. It empowers you in ways, it shows you that you are loved unconditionally for a start off. Most of us do not feel loved.
I'm lucky that I do feel loved, but I also have a question inside me as to whether I'm lovable.
Well, that would go once you connect with your inner child.
Yeah,
And
I
if you
think,
want to,
yeah,
it's on my website of karenbashford.com. There is an actual inner child meditation that will take you to meet your inner child.
really.
Very, very effective.
Well, all right, I'll take you up on that challenge.
50 minutes. That's all it takes to meet your inner child.
No, it's the fear of the unknown, I guess.
Well, what's
It's
unknown about you?
everything. I find myself quite confusing.
That's why you need to know yourself.
Well, I spend most of my time trying to know others, in the sense of trying to understand what drives them and how I
So
can
what drives you?
support that. But
What drives you?
well, what guides me is, I guess, I like being in service, in the sense that I like to help.
Yeah. And what's the
No,
purpose behind being in service for you then?
I guess it's a satisfaction on knowing that you can help someone achieve a goal they've been aspiring to. I get a certain level of satisfaction from that. So I've always assumed, therefore, my own personal driver is to help people do that.
So what would happen if you actually understood yourself well enough to know why you're truly doing what you're doing?
I possibly won't be more effective at it.
More effective, more satisfied, happier, less stress?
Well, yeah, because stress comes from the unknown as well, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Stress appears to me to be the product, in me certainly, of being on the horns of a decision, but being unwilling to make that decision because of fear of the unknown. So that creates the stress.
Yeah, so it's a vicious circle. But what happens if you then discover that you don't have to fear anything?
I guess it would be a blessed relief, frankly. Yeah. All right. Well,
And
look,
comes with
this is
knowing yourself.
This beautifully segues into the point in the show when I talk about KarenBashford.com. You can already see she's positively helping me, but I suspect if you find yourself without knowing you're in a child, or more importantly, without feeling that you have a direction, maybe floating free, but wanting to have some sort of direction, I think possibly one of the best things you could do is start a conversation. And if that's too much for you right this second, then I'm going to draw your attention to a project I'm very pleased to be involved with, which of course is the Empowered Women Life Leaders podcast, which comes out weekly. It's predominantly on audio, but it has a video element too. And you can find it by scanning the QR code I've just popped up in the corner there. And that will take you to a whole realm of both discussions and musings where Karen has addressed the very topic we're talking about today, amongst many others. But I would say start at the beginning. There's a lot of good stuff in there. I have the honor of editing these podcasts, and because you've got to listen to them to be able to work out whether people are over talking or whatever it is, to try and even it out. I've learned a lot, but there's still it's amazing. No matter how far down it appears I've climbed up the side of the hill, it still feels like the top is a long way off. But it's a process I get. Karen, would you like to summarize today's topic?
Know yourself means that you become clearer, your energy is more vitalized, and basically in knowing yourself, you take away that confusion that your purpose is and where you're going with it.
All right. And as Karen said before, there is a meditation on her website that will help you meet your inner child. I've just booked in. How does it last?
15 minutes max.
Oh, I put aside half an hour, and I'm going to be doing that later.
Good idea, because then it gives you time to reflect on what you gained from the meditation.
Well, I will be doing that later today, so watch out, world. Thank you so much for today's chat, Karen. I always find that I learn bits and pieces from these chats, and it wakes me up to ideas perhaps I hadn't considered before. I hope you are out there are finding them as useful as I am, and I hope that you'll join me again next week on the same time on the Karen Bashford Show. But until then, keep your feet on the ground, keep reaching for the stars, and please do try and look after that mental health. Until next week, bye-bye.
Bye.